In 2016, a woman in a sparkling ball gown walked out onto the stage at Wembley Arena in London. Thousands of people were on their feet, screaming her name like she was a rock star. Fireworks, smoke, booming music, and she stood there, smiling, and told the crowd that she had built something that would destroy Bitcoin, that within just a few years, her invention would be the biggest cryptocurrency on the entire planet, and everyone in that arena was going to be rich. And they believed her completely. Her name was Dr. Ruja Ignatova, and over the next few years, ordinary people all over the world, teachers, taxi drivers, pensioners, entire families, would hand her their life savings. Not millions, not hundreds of millions, around $4 billion. And some investigators believe the real number is far, far higher. And then, one day in October 2017, she stepped onto a plane and vanished off the face of the earth. No body, no trace, no goodbye. To this very day, nobody knows if she is alive or dead. She is one of only a handful of women ever to make the FBI's 10 most wanted list, with a $5 million reward on her head, and she has never been found. This is the story of how one woman pulled off one of the biggest financial scams in human history, using a cryptocurrency that didn't actually exist. So buckle up, because the story of the Cryptoqueen is even crazier than it sounds. To understand how millions of people got fooled so completely, you first have to understand Ruja herself, because she was not some street corner hustler. On paper, she was the last person on earth you would ever suspect. She was born in 1980 in a small town in Bulgaria, and while she was still a child, her family immigrated to Germany. And Ruja was brilliant, genuinely, frighteningly intelligent. She studied at Oxford, one of the most respected universities in the world. She earned a PhD in law. She went to work at McKinsey, one of the most prestigious consulting firms on the planet. She was elegant, polished. She spoke several languages, and she could walk into any room full of powerful people and own it within minutes. In other words, she had the perfect disguise. Because when a woman with a doctorate, an Oxford education, and a McKinsey resume stands in front of you and calmly explains that she's built the next Bitcoin, you don't think con artist, you think genius. And that, it turns out, was the single most dangerous weapon she had. Not technology, not even charm, credibility. But here's the first uncomfortable detail, the first red flag that everyone chose to ignore. Before OneCoin even existed, Ruja already had a brush with the law connected to an earlier business that collapsed under suspicious circumstances. The warning signs were there from the very beginning. People just didn't want to look. And honestly, you're about to see why. Around 2014, the whole world was suddenly hearing about Bitcoin. Most people had no real idea what it was or how it worked. All they knew was the headlines, that a handful of early investors had turned tiny amounts of money into absolute fortunes almost overnight. And more than anything, people were terrified of one thing, missing out on the next one. Ruja understood something powerful, something most scammers never figure out. People didn't need to understand cryptocurrency. They just needed to believe they were getting in early. So, together with a co-founder named Sebastian Greenwood, she launched a brand new digital currency called OneCoin, and she marketed it with two simple, magical words: the Bitcoin killer. Now here's where the genius and the pure evil really begins, because how do you actually sell a cryptocurrency to people who don't understand it? Normally, you just sell them the coins, but OneCoin did something far cleverer. They didn't sell you coins directly. They sold you educational packages, online courses that were supposed to teach you all about trading and crypto. And those packages came bundled with tokens, which you could then use to mine your very own OneCoins. It sounded technical, it sounded sophisticated, it sounded completely legitimate, but it was all a smokescreen. Because the real engine humming away underneath all of it was something much older and much, much simpler: a pyramid scheme. Here's how it actually worked. You buy a package, then you're told that the real way to get rich isn't just to sit on your OneCoin, it's to recruit other people to buy packages too. For every single person you bring in, you earn a fat commission, and then those people go and recruit more people, and those people recruit even more. So the money pouring into OneCoin wasn't coming from some revolutionary technology. It was coming from a never-ending flood of brand new victims at the bottom, paying the people sitting above them. The oldest trick in the book, dressed up in the shiny new language of the future. But honestly, to call OneCoin just a pyramid scheme actually undersells how breathtakingly bold this con really was, because there was one detail so audacious, it's almost impossible to believe they got away with it. A real cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, runs on something called a blockchain. It's a public, decentralized digital ledger that anyone in the world can inspect at any time. That's the entire point of it. Nobody controls it. No single company can fake it. The math itself is the truth. OneCoin claimed to have a blockchain too. It didn't. There was no real blockchain. The coins were never actually being mined. There was no public ledger that anyone could check. And that value, the price of a OneCoin that kept magically climbing higher and higher, making every single investor feel richer and richer with each passing day, it wasn't set by any market or any supply and demand or any technology at all. It was just a number that Ruja's company typed into a private database and increased whenever they felt like it. Just think about that for a second. Millions of people around the world were watching their OneCoin balance climb day after day, completely convinced they were becoming wealthy. And the entire thing was a number on a screen that one single company invented and controlled. There was nothing underneath it, nothing holding it up, nothing real at all. And when actual cryptocurrency experts started looking closely at OneCoin and began shouting from the rooftops that it was a fraud, that there was no blockchain, that the coins were fake, that the whole thing was a scam, it didn't matter. The believers refused to listen, because in their minds they were already getting rich, or at least they thought they were. And the money came rolling in like a tidal wave. OneCoin spread to more than 170 countries around the world. From Europe to Africa to Asia, ordinary people emptied their bank accounts to buy in. And this is the part of the story that is genuinely heartbreaking, because a huge number of OneCoin's victims weren't greedy gamblers chasing easy money. They were poor and working class people, many of them in developing countries, who had never invested in anything in their entire lives. Families sold their land. People took out loans they couldn't afford. Some handed over every last penny of their savings, absolutely convinced that this was their one and only chance to escape poverty, their golden ticket to a better life for their children. Because that, in the end, is what Ruja was really selling. Not a coin, she was selling hope, and she built it like a religion. There were enormous, stadium-sized events all around the globe, drenched in lights and music and roaring, ecstatic crowds. There were glossy promotional videos, luxury magazines, fleets of expensive cars. Ruja flew from country to country in designer gowns, treated everywhere like royalty, the queen of a financial revolution. People didn't just invest in OneCoin, they believed in it. They believed in her. At its absolute peak, that famous night at Wembley Arena in London, one of the most iconic venues on the entire planet, had thousands of devoted fans roaring her name as she promised them the future. And the money she pulled in? Investigators believe OneCoin took in billions of dollars. Some estimates put the worldwide figure as high as 15 or 16 billion. For a while there, Ruja Ignatova had genuinely pulled off the impossible. She had convinced the whole world that nothing was something. But every single pyramid scheme ever built shares the exact same fatal flaw. To keep paying the people at the top, you need an endless, infinite supply of fresh new victims at the bottom. And the world only has so many people in it. By 2016, the cracks were beginning to show. Investigators in several different countries had quietly started looking into OneCoin. Banks were growing deeply suspicious about the gigantic, unexplained flows of money sloshing around. Journalists were starting to ask very hard questions. And those experts who had been screaming fraud for years were finally, slowly, starting to be heard. But behind the scenes, there was an even bigger problem brewing. People wanted to cash out. They wanted to turn all that OneCoin wealth on their screens into actual spendable money. But here's the cruel catch about a coin that doesn't really exist. There was nowhere to genuinely sell it. The exchange that OneCoin eventually set up was tightly limited, heavily restricted, and totally controlled by the company itself. For the vast majority of people, getting their real money back out was very nearly impossible. The walls were closing in, and Ruja was far too smart not to feel it. What almost none of her adoring followers knew was that, quietly, on the other side of the world, federal prosecutors in the United States had been patiently building a case against her. And in October 2017, they finally secured a warrant for her arrest. But here's the thing that still troubles investigators to this day. They believe somebody tipped her off. Somebody told her they were coming for her, and Ruja moved fast. On the 25th of October 2017, Ruja Ignatova bought a plane ticket. Not a private jet, not some elaborate escape, just a simple, ordinary, budget Ryanair flight from Sofia in Bulgaria to Athens in Greece. She walked onto that plane, and that is the very last confirmed sighting of the Cryptoqueen that anyone, anywhere, has ever had. She didn't land into the waiting arms of the police. She never posted online again. She never contacted her millions of followers. She simply evaporated. No verified sighting since. No body, no trace. One of the most recognizable women on the planet, a woman who had performed in front of roaring, sold-out arenas, was suddenly just gone, as if she had never existed at all. And the questions exploded immediately. How does a woman that famous, that closely watched, that badly wanted by authorities, just disappear into thin air? Where on earth did she go? And the question that still haunts the investigators chasing her to this very day, is she even still alive? With Ruja gone, the enormous empire she left behind began to crumble, and one by one, the people around her got caught in the wreckage. Her own younger brother, Konstantin Ignatov, stepped in to help run the operation after she vanished. In 2019, he was arrested at an airport in Los Angeles. He eventually pleaded guilty and began cooperating with the authorities, telling them everything he knew from the inside. Her co-founder, Sebastian Greenwood, was tracked down, arrested, and later sentenced to 20 years in prison. A lawyer in the United States named Mark Scott was convicted of laundering hundreds of millions of dollars of OneCoin's money, hiding it through a tangled web of offshore accounts and fake investment funds. One by one, the machine was taken apart. Prosecutors described OneCoin as one of the largest fraud schemes ever conducted anywhere in the world. And then, in June of 2022, the FBI did something genuinely rare. They added Ruja Ignatova to their 10 most wanted fugitives list, making her only the 11th woman ever to appear on it since that list was first created back in 1950. The reward for information leading to her capture was eventually pushed all the way up to $5 million. And yet, after all of that, after all the arrests and convictions and global headlines, the woman at the very center of it all, the most famous con artist of the century, has never been found. So what on earth actually happened to Ruja Ignatova? Broadly speaking, there are two dark theories, and honestly, neither one of them has a happy ending. The first theory is that she is dead. Some investigative reporting has suggested that Ruja had gotten herself dangerously tangled up with extremely powerful and violent people, organized crime figures who were connected to the movement of all of that money. According to this theory, sometime after she vanished, she was murdered, possibly out at sea on a yacht, her body weighed down and dumped into the deep water so that she could never be found, never be arrested, and most importantly, never testify against the dangerous men she'd done business with. If that's true, then the woman who scammed the entire world was, in the end, quietly erased by the very people she trusted. The second theory is that Ruja Ignatova is very much alive, that she planned this disappearance carefully, far in advance, with fraudulent passports, with plastic surgery to completely change her face, and with a hidden fortune, possibly an enormous stash of Bitcoin, big enough to let her live in luxury, in the shadows, for the rest of her life. Protected, perhaps, by powerful friends in countries that would simply never hand her over. Under this theory, she could be absolutely anywhere right now, walking through a busy market, sitting quietly in a cafe, a brand new face, a brand new name, calmly watching the entire world hunt for a woman who, on paper, no longer appears to exist. The honest truth? Nobody knows. The FBI continues to search for her as though she's alive. Other reports insist she's been dead for years. And somewhere out there, the real answer does exist. But for now, it remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the entire history of financial crime. But before we wrap up, it's worth pausing on the real question sitting underneath this whole story. How did this actually happen? How did millions of intelligent, ordinary people get fooled this completely for this long? And the uncomfortable answer is that Ruja Ignatova didn't really hack any computers. She didn't crack any secret code. She hacked people. She understood better than almost anyone that the fear of missing out is one of the most powerful forces on the face of the earth. And she understood that if you wrap a lie in enough confidence, enough credentials, enough lights, enough music and applause, people won't just believe it, they will defend it fiercely, even when the cold, hard truth is staring them right in the face. And the most heartbreaking part of all is who actually paid the price. It wasn't the banks, it wasn't the wealthy elite, it was ordinary families, so many of them already struggling to get by, who lost absolutely everything, chasing a future that was never, ever real. That is the true cost of OneCoin. Not just the billions of dollars that vanished, but the trust, the hope, and the countless quiet lives that were shattered behind the headlines. So let's take a step back and quickly piece this incredible story back together because we have covered an enormous amount. A brilliant, Oxford-educated, McKinsey-trained woman named Ruja Ignatova realized that in the chaotic early days of the crypto boom, people didn't actually need to understand a cryptocurrency, they just needed to be terrified of missing out on it. So in 2014, she launched OneCoin, and she called it the Bitcoin killer. But underneath the surface, OneCoin had no real blockchain, no real mining, and no real value at all. Its price was simply a number her own company typed into a computer. The whole thing was an ancient pyramid scheme dressed up in the language of the future, where the money came entirely from a flood of fresh victims recruited at the bottom. She sold it like a religion, packing out arenas like Wembley, and people across more than 170 countries poured in their savings, with total losses estimated in the billions. But as investigators slowly closed in and a secret American warrant was issued for her arrest, somebody tipped her off. In October 2017, she boarded a budget flight from Sofia to Athens, and she vanished without a single trace. Her brother, her co-founder, and her money launderer were all eventually caught and convicted, but Ruja herself became one of the FBI's 10 most wanted, with a $5 million reward on her head. And to this very day, nobody knows whether she's hiding somewhere with a brand new face or lying at the bottom of the sea. The story of the Cryptoqueen is a chilling reminder of something that never really changes. The tools always get newer, crypto, blockchain, AI, whatever the next big thing happens to be, but the oldest con in the entire world stays exactly, precisely the same. Sell people a dream, make them feel like they're getting in early, and then disappear long before they ever realize the dream was completely empty. Ruja Ignatova promised to change the world. Instead, she robbed it blind and slipped quietly into the shadows, leaving behind millions of broken dreams and one haunting question that may never, ever be answered. Where in the world is the Cryptoqueen? Now, if this story gripped you, you are going to want to see how another financial mastermind pulled off something just as wild. So click the video on your screen right now, and I'll see you over there. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. You're a legend, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.